The iron gates stood tall and unmoving, black steel cutting the dawn in half like a cruel line drawn across a life that had already been fractured too many times. A tired man stood on the wrong side of those gates, one hand gripping the steering wheel, the other resting protectively over the small head leaning against his arm. The engine hummed softly, the sky still pale with early morning light, and yet nothing about this moment felt calm. This was his home. His name was etched into every contract, every stone, every locked door beyond that gate. And still, he was being treated like an intruder. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in stories that remind us what really matters, take a moment right now to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. It truly helps these stories reach more hearts. The man had not always lived behind gates. There was a time when his world was small, cramped, and noisy, when joy came from cheap takeout eaten on the floor and laughter echoing off bare apartment walls. Back then, he had been a husband, a partner, someone who shared the weight of dreams and disappointments with another soul. Life had not been glamorous, but it had been full. Then illness came quietly like a thief that did not bother to hide. Months of hospital rooms, whispered prayers, and promises made in the dark ended with a silence so heavy it changed the shape of his breathing forever. Overnight, he became a single father, carrying grief in one arm and responsibility in the other. Work became his refuge and his battlefield. He poured himself into building something that would protect his child from the kind of fear he now knew too well. Long nights turned into long years, and exhaustion became a constant companion. Success arrived slowly at first, then all at once, swelling into headlines, wealth, and the mansion that now loomed mockingly behind those gates. The house was meant to be a fortress, a place where his child would never feel unsafe. He hired the best people, installed the most advanced systems, and trusted others to guard what mattered most because he was too busy trying to be everything else. That morning, exhaustion clung to him like a second skin. His child had fallen asleep on the drive home from a rare overnight trip, small fingers still curled around a worn backpack zipper. He smiled at that, at the innocence that survived despite everything. As he pulled up to the gate, he expected the familiar smooth opening, the quiet welcome of a place they belonged. Instead, the car was met with cold instructions through an intercom, suspicion wrapped in protocol, and a refusal that felt absurd enough to be a joke. Identification was demanded, authorization questioned, access denied. He complied at first, assuming it was a misunderstanding, another glitch in a system he had barely paid attention to since it was installed. Minutes passed. The child stirred, confused, sensing tension even in sleep. The guards remained unmoved, voices distant and procedural, treating the man like a stranger who had wandered too close to someone else's life. Cars began to line up behind him, impatient, curious, judgmental. Heat crept into his chest, not rage yet, but a deep, familiar ache, the kind that came from being unseen. As the sun rose higher, memories rose with it. He remembered standing in hospital hallways, invisible to the world, as his life cracked open. He remembered holding a tiny hand at a funeral, promising safety while feeling utterly powerless. And now here he was, successful by every external measure, still being told he did not belong. The mansion behind the gate felt suddenly hollow, less like a home and more like a symbol of everything that could go wrong when trust replaced presence. What finally pushed him past patience was not the inconvenience or the embarrassment. It was the way his child looked up at him, eyes wide and uncertain, silently asking why they were not allowed inside their own home. In that moment, something inside him hardened into clarity. He understood that protection without humanity was just another form of harm. He stepped out of the car, careful not to wake the child fully, and walked toward the gate. Cameras followed his movement, lenses whirring softly, recording without understanding. He did not shout or threaten. He simply stood there, a father who had lost too much already, demanding dignity in the quietest, most unyielding way. When the gate finally opened, it was slow and reluctant, as if conceding to an error it could not correct. Inside, the mansion was silent, polished surfaces reflecting a life that looked perfect from the outside. He carried his child in, laid them gently on the couch, and watched their chest rise and fall until sleep reclaimed them. Only then did the weight of the morning settle fully on his shoulders. He realized how close he had come to accepting something unacceptable simply because he was tired. Within minutes, the security team was summoned, not in anger, but in resolve. He listened to explanations about procedures and protocols, about safety and rules. He heard the words, but he also saw the absence behind them. No one had asked who he was beyond an ID check. No one had noticed the child. No one had thought to escalate, to question, to act with empathy. The system had worked exactly as designed, and that was the problem. He let them go, all of them. Not as a display of power, but as a correction. He knew too well what it meant to lose a job, to start over with fear in your throat. So he made sure severance was generous, recommendations honest, and the message clear. Skill without compassion was not enough. Protection that forgot the people it served was meaningless. The rest of the day unfolded slowly. New arrangements were made, but more importantly, new priorities were set. He spent the afternoon on the floor with his child, building castles out of blocks that were far less impressive than the stone walls outside. Laughter filled rooms that had echoed empty for too long. The mansion, for the first time, felt warm. News of what happened spread quietly, then loudly. Some called him ruthless, others called him principled. He did not care for the labels. What mattered was the lesson he hoped his child would absorb without ever needing to articulate it. That no amount of success excused the absence of kindness. That systems should bend toward humanity, not the other way around. That standing up for yourself did not require cruelty. In the days that followed, he personally interviewed a new team. He asked about their training, yes, but also about their families, their values, their worst days. He told them the story of that morning without drama, as a fact, a line that should never be crossed again. The gates still stood tall, the cameras still watched, but something fundamental had changed. There was now a human pulse behind the security. Late one evening, as the sun dipped behind the estate and painted the sky in quiet colors, he stood by the gate again, this time from the inside. His child ran ahead, fearless, trusting the world the way only children can. Watching that small figure framed against the vastness of the property, he felt a swell of emotion that surprised him. The gates were no longer barriers, they were boundaries defined by care. If this story is resonating with you, if it's stirring something familiar about dignity, loss, or the quiet power of doing the right thing, please take a moment to comment below. Share what this story made you feel, or a moment in your own life when kindness mattered more than rules. Life did not suddenly become easy after that. He was still a single father. Nights were still long. Grief still visited when he least expected it. But there was strength now in knowing he could choose the kind of world his child grew up in, one decision at a time. The mansion remained impressive, but it was no longer the centerpiece of their lives. Love was. Near the end of the driveway, the gate closed softly behind them as they returned from a walk, not as a rejection, but as a quiet promise. A promise that home was not defined by locks or guards, but by who was welcomed in and how. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps keep stories like this alive, and it means more than you know. And before you go, leave a comment with a single word that this story brought to mind. Sometimes one word is enough to remind us we're not alone.